Hello guys and very welcome to the stream. I see there's already 100 people waiting before we even started, and that's wonderful. This seems to be a very popular stream. So what we're talking about today, and it's a calling show, so we'll take some calls very soon. But we're talking about the case from UCT where an honors student gave in a paper, or even I think it was a dissertation, and the student actually was talking about colonization and how bad white people are, you know, all the general stuff from the humanities department at UCT. And he actually ended off the paper with "one settler, one bullet." And then the vice chancellor of UCT went ahead and she endorsed the whole paper. And that's quite terrible, because this is the first time that I know of that a public figure has come out in support of something like that, like "one settler, one bullet." That's just terrible. Before we start in with the call-in show and we're taking the first caller, I'll just go through some of the stuff that has happened at UCT quite recently. In July 2016, UCT disinvited Fleming Rose, the Danish newspaper article, who had printed a series of cartoons on Muhammad, because they said that these unlimited freedoms of expressions could cause damage to the social fabric. Now, they disinvite someone who draws pictures of Muhammad, but then they endorse killing a certain part of the population. That's just terrible. And in 2015, we know the whole Fees Must Fall movement, where protesters were running around in t-shirts that read stuff like "one settler, one bullet" as well, and "fuck white people," etc. And these things were all recorded in the news, and nobody said anything about it. At least the UCT management didn't endorse it. They also chanted "one settler, one bullet" at the statue of Cecil John Rhodes. And we know that in February of 2016, after the falling movement, the Fees Must Fall movement, the student protesters actually burned down artwork and vandalized property of the university. And that's just terrible. You can already see the terrible double standards here. Also, we know that in March 2017, it was revealed that some students had been set the following exam question at an exam: write detailed notes on race and racism in your answers, so take care to specifically reason. Sorry guys, someone's just calling me here. Take care to specify the reasons for the impossibility of friendship between blacks and whites. Let me read that again. Write detailed notes on race and racism in your answer. Take care to specify the reasons for impossibility of friendship between blacks and whites. So we already see what the precedent is that is being set here at UCT, and it's a terrible precedent. And the fact that the vice chancellor went out and endorsed "one settler, one bullet," in other words, a call for the slaughter or the murder of white people, specifically Boers in this country, it's something absolutely terrible. So yeah, let's go ahead and go to our calls. So how this will work, I'm going to show you guys now. Yeah, you can see my Discord channel. You can see there's a lot of people in the vetting and in the general channel already. And how it works, you join the Discord, the link's in the description, and you let me just get rid of that guy. He is an Antifa, and we don't want him here. Any case, we can't have Antifa in the server because they just make trouble. But any case, so you join one of these chats, and from there you will be pushed to me. I'm here in the live stream channel, and this live stream channel is also the one that is broadcasted on air. So I'll take in the first guy, and then from there you guys can join the chats, and you guys can be the second people. I know Rational Gent was the first one to be who wants to call in. Hello Rational Gent, how are you?
Hey Willem, how are you, my friend?
No, I'm quite good. How are things there down in the Cape?
I don't know what you're talking about because I'm completely anonymous, but yeah, if I was here, it'd be fantastic, my brother.
I was actually talking about the UCT thing that is the topic of this video, but it's quite funny the way you responded.
Well, all I can say is thank God I'm not at UCT, my friend. I actually had a nightmare the other day. I dreamt that I was whitening in UCT. It was quite a shock, bro. Woke up in a sweat.
Okay, now it's terrible what happened there. The fact that they endorsed a public call for violence within an academic paper.
Well, what else can we expect from the Lagos School of Witchcraft and Communism, my friend? This has been coming for quite some time.
It's quite funny that they were one of the first people who pushed for desegregation, and now, as I said in the intro, they are even including questions in the exams, asking students to explain why white people and black people can never live together and never be friends. So now we have segregation being pushed from the same leftists, or you can even say communists, who started the whole desegregation movement in South Africa.
Yeah, but this is what it appears to be. It's like they've been completely subverted by cultural Marxism. Way back when we could see in 2012, when the whole push officially started for Rhodes Must Fall, how that just manifested itself a few years later in South Africa as an attack on the European foundation of UCT. We saw that where they would burn down priceless, irretrievable artworks just because white people had made them at UCT. I mean, irreplaceable stuff. How
Definitely.
they would attack. Yeah, how they would attack statues just because the people that founded the university happened to be white. It's institutional racism at its finest. How if a white person were to just say something that could be perceived as offensive, not even racist, how the institution that is UCT would come down them completely. But you have people walking around on campus with shirts like "kill all white people," and excuse my profanity, but fuck white people. Yeah, the double standards are actually laughable.
No, it's terrible, but it's quite funny still in some sense. But we have to do something about this, and we can't go on, with this precedent being set, because these are young and impressionable guys. These are mostly black kids who get scholarships from the state and from other private institutions like the Rhodes Fund to go study at UCT, and these are the things that they are being taught every single day, that this is normal and this is good.
Yeah, it's complete indoctrination. I've been looking at statistics, and if you look at black graduates as a whole, only about 18% of them land up at tertiary institutions. They all land up mostly at places like UCT. That's excluding the formerly black universities. And if these are the people that are going to become the ruling class when we enter the workforce one day, I think that's a devastating concept to encapsulate, dude. It's horrifying.
No,
like these are the future leaders, bro.
I completely agree with you. Rational Gent, thanks for calling in. I'm going to put you back there in the waiting room, and you can tell the guys there that they must please put up the next guest to call in.
Okay, 100%, boy. Good luck for the show.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.
All right, that was quite a very insightful conversation we had there with Rational Gent. I'm waiting for the next guest to be put here in the live stream channel with me, but it's terrible what's happening. What's being said here. I don't know why. Oh, okay, it seems like they're going to probably give us the next guy right now, and then we can continue with the conversation. Any case, guys, while we wait for the next guy to come up, it would be great for some of you guys to join us here. I see the next guy's already here, but any case, as I explained to you, join the Discord with a link in the description. Join the vetting channel there. Yeah, as you can see where my mouse is, and that from there you will be put in chat with me, and you can be part of the calling show. Hello, Victor. How are you? It seems like we can't hear him. He was muted. Hello, Victor. How are you?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yep, perfectly.
Great. Yeah, I'm actually using my phone tonight. I find it a better connection than my computer actually.
Yeah,
as if the quality is a bit better. But nice to be with you again.
Yeah, it's great to always have you calling in. So can you tell us a bit about what your opinion is on the whole UCT thing, the strikings, as well as the endorsement of one settler, one bullet by the vice chancellor?
Yeah. Well, basically what I would like to do, as I've said to you before, I'm one of the old topics here, and I would like to explain the perspective of how things were years ago regarding violence as such, and how things are now today. Is that fine with?
Yeah, I think that will be a very
Yeah.
insightful thing to talk about.
Well, this is how it worked. Many years ago, when I grew up, in the well, I was born in the mid '60s, so I started having brains, from probably 1977, 78, and when I grew up as a young teenager and later teens, we had a bell rule, and it was quite amazing. Those 6 o'clock, sirens would go the entire Johannesburg, West Rand, East Rand, everything. These sirens were at the police stations, and then they went off for like 3 minutes, and after there was no blacks on the street.
Mm.
Now, that sounds very racist. Come on, let's be honest. But there was a
Mm.
fantastic reason for it. And the reason was because of what we've got today is this violence. Many people don't actually realize it, but during the 70s and 80s, we were really struggling with two wars. We had the war in Angola, which served its purpose, but then we also had an internal and with this violence. Now, violence, which we say is nothing new. We have seen it.
So can
We
I
have
just
witnessed
quickly
it.
ask you something? The whole bell
Yeah,
system,
sure.
was that only instituted later during apartheid as a precaution to violence, or was that
Yes.
something that was always part of apartheid?
No, no. What happened in the late 70s with the Sharpeville thing, and when they started burning down the schools and stuff? Their aim was to go from the locations, into town, and we
Mm.
had to stop that. So that was most definitely a later a precautionary security precautionary measure that we had,
So in other
and
words, the schools in the township were being burnt down, and then they
yes,
didn't really have much of an
yes.
effect. So the people burning down the schools in the townships wanted to come into the cities and burn down the schools in the cities as well, and that's what you got, or what was being tried to stop by the bell system.
Well, exactly.
Hmm.
Not try to stop. We actually now violence is an African culture, and especially a South African culture. You must remember the ANC, the struggle of the old ANC, was not with a war like we had in Angola. It was through the internal war, and it was conducted by violence.
Well, that
Um,
sounds like a terribly politically incorrect thing to say.
Okay. Well, it's the truth, I physically witnessed it. What happened was in 1984, I did national service, 1984, 85. That was my 2 years, and later on, I went to the border and stuff like that. But in 1984, from 1984, 5, 6, 7, 8, it was really very bad. And I'm going to tell you what actually happened.
Hmm.
And I think it's important that people must understand why we did what we did, how we did it, and what's the difference then and now.
All
Now, you
right,
must
tell
remember,
us.
violence was enticed by the black leadership. Nelson Mandela.
Yeah, I think that's
I
very
mean,
obvious.
no, he did. Nelson Mandela killed a lot of black people. Listen, let me tell you one thing. Yes, he killed a few white people with the bombings he had later on. I mean, Winnie Mandela stood up and said, with our tires and our matches, we will liberate this country.
Yeah,
And
that's well
you know
known.
what? Yeah, it's
That
well
Winnie
known.
Mandela was
And
inciting this necklace culture.
yes, exactly. And everybody knows her history of the violence that she enticed. But you know what's the interesting thing, Willem? That people honestly don't understand with this violence. The
Hmm.
violence that we experienced in the old South Africa was a tribal law violence, and it's exactly the same today. In 1984, I didn't go to the border. I stayed behind in camp, and then we did riot duty. It was quite a big thing. The average citizen in the town did not know what happened. Do you know that people had no cooking clue? I'm talking about the public, the white South African public. My mother and father and grandmother, they had no idea that just a few kilometers up the road in Davidton and in Sebokeng and in those areas, there was literally a war going on, a black on black war. I have to stress. I remember the first night we came through, we didn't have food. I phoned my father. I said to him, I sneaked out. We were stationed at police stations. I phoned my dad. I said to him, listen, Dad, we're hungry. It's myself and three of my buddies. Whatever you do, please bring us food. And my father came, my family there. I'll never forget it. It's very important that we understand this part of history. And this is just my little story. My dad, and he brought a whole chicken, and we ate it up in about 3 minutes and stuff like that. And Jan was standing, he saw me in camp. They came to visit me, and he saw me on parade and with my nice beret and stuff. Jan was standing in full gear. I had my R1, and I had bush, and my bush hat. And my father looked at me, and what's going on? he was flabbergasted and frightened at the same time. And of course, we were told in no uncertain terms not to say a word. And I said, no, don't worry. We just doing patrols, which was. But we were there for the support for the old police for the police force then. And basically, what we did is we drove around right through the night, every hour. Then this. People would go 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 in the morning, whatever the case may be. 24 hours, we would do patrols.
I think that's something that cannot be stressed enough, and it was actually very well done by AfriForum in the documentary called Tainted Heroes. That the fight was basically between black tribes in South Africa killing each other, and that's why the police were mostly in the squatter camps, is to try and keep killing the tribes, keep the tribes from killing each other.
Exactly, and this is what people don't understand. So what would happen is what we did is we kept the black on black violence those years. We kept it under control, while to the best of our ability. What they would do is when the biffle passed, then they would start rioting and violence, and they would literally burn each other out. I mean, necklacing is not a new thing in South Africa.
Definitely not.
Yeah, and the very interesting part of our history is that in 1989, the UN stopped the border war and that kind of history, and everybody came back, and we had this 32 battalion, which were very sharp, and they started sending in the 32 battalion guys. Now that was for the first time, the rioters and the violence was met on equal ground. You understand? And there was a big story, and they said, no, this is black on black violence. Very ironic. It was black on black violence anyway. And of course, the a-hole old the clerk, he then demolished 32 battalion, and everybody knows the history there. But this is nothing new. I knew, and yes, and in 1989, then Mandela came out, and the violence stopped, and everybody thought there would be peace and joy, and and the whole Rainbow Nation and all this crap we've got today. But people that was there, like myself and many others, knew that this was going to flame up again. And look at what we've got today. The difference today is that there's no control. The ANC started this violence. They actually got the country through their violence, which is a fact. And today it's out of control. We shot 66,000 policemen, or around about there, don't quote me on that. We have no army. I mean, they're about 23,000. They do nothing. As we know, more than half of them is HIV positive, which is a problem, because you cannot operate with that virus.
Of course, that's a massive problem, and
against anybody. Yeah,
and they can't be fired or anything, because it's prevented by the law, even though many of them have HIV/AIDS, and they have full-on AIDS in the army, and they actually mean nothing to the army. They can't be fired. Victor, thank you very much for the contribution. We've been talking for almost 15 minutes now, so I'm going to ask maybe if we can get the next guy on. I'm going to put you back there in the vetting room, and then you can tell them to please give me the next person, please.
Right. Okay, we'll do that.
Thank you very much, Victor. Yeah, it's always very interesting to hear the perspective of someone who was in the township wars, as we can almost call it. It's something that we really need to know and that we really need to hear about. Definitely, is the fact that it wasn't just white people going into the townships and causing trouble there. They were actually trying to prevent some trouble. And as I said to Victor as well, there's a very good documentary on that, Tainted Heroes by AfriForum. I see we got our next guest here. Hello, Stavro Boer. How are you?
Doing good, Willem.
So,
how are you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I am a Boer Afrikaner who has living most of my adult life in the former Soviet Union, and keep my ear very much on railways to also hear what the vibe is in the international media. And yeah, so I'm. It's fascinating.
When did you move to the former Soviet Union, or did you move after the fall of the Soviet Union or before?
After, during the time called Perestroika.
Oh, of course, of course. I remember that part of history with what was his name, the president then. He also sorry,
Boris Yeltsin. After Gorbachev.
Oh yeah, that was the one I was thinking of, Gorbachev.
Yeah, Gorbachev introduced glasnost and the whole policy of openness, and why I'm interested in speaking also maybe from it's a former Soviet Union paradigm, post-glasnost, post-perestroika, is also because it puts in perspective, because when speaking about ideology such as communism or Marxism, that imported alien ideology to the Russian soil, and the ethnicities of the former Soviet Union, Russia, and 15 satellite nations, that forced down by criminal banned ideology has led to what we have today in Russia, the need for rebuilding. And what I'm fascinated also by is the solidarity from Russia, because the people of the country know where their grandparents came from, where their fathers and mothers came from, what communism has done to an industry like agriculture. When you have 100 years history here to just look at what the effect is of pure ideology that today is being espoused by a generation of very young so-called born frees. And I think we've just reached a watershed moment with what has happened at UCT. And I look forward to just picking that apart with you over the next 5 minutes. That'd be great.
Just before we go on, it's very interesting that you say that Russians, because of the fact that they went through communism, they know what we are going through now because they have experienced communism themselves. And of course, the expropriation without compensation that we are facing now is something that we have seen in Russia earlier during the time of the kulaks. And these people really, when you talk about these things with them, it's things that they or their parents or their grandparents have experienced themselves. But do you think, or can you tell me, being in Russia and all of that, can you tell me whether they actually know about what's going on in South Africa and know that it's basically the same thing going on as was going on in Russia during the lives of their parents or their earlier lives?
Yeah, for sure. Just over the last 4 months, we've seen. I've I've stopped counting, but around 100 newspaper articles, radio interviews, debates, television, news broadcasts, documentaries run on Russian state television that is literally speaking of the plight of South Africa, broadcasting struggle songs that are being justified as a historical reality due to the struggle as is called against colonialism or apartheid, and translating the words of these songs for the 150 million Russians to actually hear what current presidents are singing from platforms to audiences that are global, because this is captured and transmitted radio, television, the internet. And that for the Russian to actually hear those songs still sung today is shocking. But again, now to hear an endorsement by a vice chancellor of a kid who continues the song as if the struggle, as it is defined by them, needs to be continued, but literally calling to violence and to murder. That needs to be put into the right context today. For me, again, it's a watershed moment that there's a support of something like this. And in Russia, in other countries where I've been also researching the news about South Africa, and specifically the discussion around expropriation without compensation, because that's I think that has been the catalyst for a new era in global awareness and conversation around the plight of South Africa, the plight of the tribes and the peoples of South Africa.
Speaking of global awareness, I just want to ask you, so is it the Russian mainstream media, TV channels, etc., are they doing a lot of coverage on the situation in South Africa, the plight of the farmers and the government seizing land and so forth?
Yes, there is a lot of media coverage. I would say even now, every other day, I find new links to current issues in South Africa, and there's a growing solidarity looking at the history of Southern Africa. Any educated viewer and hearer who has access to internet, they're drawing conclusions when they look at what's happening in South Africa. There are people in Southern Africa who break down and destroy, who lead protests such as this young gentleman that we're referring to, it's not used.
And you speak Russian, even though you live, or even though you are an Afrikaner.
My wife is Russian.
Okay.
We speak Russian at home.
That's very interesting to hear your perspective on here. I think that's a perspective that we have not yet heard on the show at all, and it's very interesting.
Yeah, what we've had over 100 news items, documentaries of 17, 18 minutes long, run on state television, where again leaders, present and current, of the current political structure of South Africa sing struggle songs. Again, they translate there where there's might be more liberal media. They might try and define this as acceptable in the context of the past. But again, what this moment has brought us to in UCT is, again, it's a watershed moment, because that same message which has been preached from the pulpit of public office, leaders who are to build a country, not to polarize people and the people of Southern Africa, the next generation is catching the same tune. And if the senior leadership of this current South Africa this current system of this country is going overseas and saying there are no farm killings, and yet at the same time it's a daily occurrence in South Africa, the violence that is skyrocketing out of proportion to, I believe, anything that any other nation knows. South Africa has become a leader in statistics as far as rape, number one in the world. Russia, the Russian statistic is 40 times less, not half as much, not 10 times, but 40 times less. So it's shocking for 150 million inhabitants of a country to see what their previous regime supported in Southern Africa and Africa as a whole has led to this anarchy, to this hate, to this polarization, to this evil that is happening. And that message is growing like a tidal surge in Russia.
And I think also in Russia, the previous government, the Soviets or the Bolsheviks, are not that popular with the current dispensation in Russia. Or are they still popular?
The ideology has been tried and tested there, and it has been weighed and found wanting.
A massive failure.
It has led to a failure. We look at Venezuela, look at Cuba, look at so many other places. So
look at South Africa.
Yeah, and so Russia today has an opportunity to be a voice of reason politically into this mayhem of ideological violation that's taking place at the tip of Africa. And that's why I'm excited that there's honest media in the largest country in the world as far as land space goes, twice the size of Canada, that is showing solidarity. And there will even, I believe, be more and more focus on this. And I can guarantee you that this news that is current and breaking in South Africa will be what the media in Russia will be speaking about next week. It does take time for the impact to reach Asia and Eastern Europe, but it's going to get there. And I think that is leaders in institutions of South Africa, when they endorse hate speech, when they endorse calling to violent crime and murder from a platform that should be forming the mind and the ethos of the next generation. Again, that's a watershed moment for us to catch a wake-up call about where we are going very fast in Southern Africa.
And it makes me very optimistic to hear that the Russian media is so fast to cover all of these events, because I know in the West, Western Europe, America, for example, it's not covered very much. It's mostly ignored by the mainstream media there.
It is, because the mainstream media is busy with their own battles, such as yesterday's and today's headline by the president of France saying that nationalism is the antonym, the opposite, the very antithesis of patriotism. And the news headlines also from liberal Western media focusing on the circus of the ideological battle between the West's different paradigm positions. And so people are watching that reality show while what's going down in Africa is being pushed off onto the periphery and not being spoken about. And that is why I think we should be looking wider and further to maybe more non-traditional partners in communication to speak the truth of what is happening in South Africa. And have a voice. I know of Russians who are raising up media platforms and they're calling it the voice of the free boor, but in Russian. And that's encouraging to know that there is this solidarity.
Wow, that is very, as I said, it makes me very, very optimistic. Thank you very much for coming on, Stavro Boer. I'm going to put you back there in the waiting channel and you can tell the next person to come up. Is that good?
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you very much for coming up. I think I've learned, and we all have learned a lot from you. It was very, very interesting to hear about the perspective of the Russian people.
Thank you.
From an insider there. Thank you very much for coming up, and goodbye.
Goodbye, Willem.
Well, that was truly extremely interesting to me to hear from someone who is sitting on the ground in Russia, who lives in Russia, telling me that the mainstream media reports on what's going on in South Africa on such a regular basis. Just for you guys who have just joined or who have joined later, he told me that he speaks Russian, and he knows that the Russian media, they have what do you call it? They have had more than 100 reports in the last few days on what's going on in South Africa. I see I've got my next guest here. Grey Zeta, how are you?
Hey, Willem.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself?
All right. Gosh, what a week we've had now down in Cape. I want to come back. I want to come back to the title of the stream and where we started off with this UCT thing. This has been utterly perplexing for me. This vice chancellor of the UCT. In 1 week, she deems it fit for a person of her position to broadcast to a massive audience what is essentially, doesn't matter which way you slice it, it is essentially a congratulation of a wonderful piece of hate.
Exactly. It's a call for war, it's a call for violence, it's a call to slaughter a certain minority within the country. It's terrible.
Oh, Willem, the connection sounds a bit bad. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you perfectly. Can you hear me?
Okay. All right. So this vice chancellor, she congratulates the student for his piece, and this gets spread like wildfire. And when she gets clapback, which of course she was going to get clapback, it was deeply insensitive to start with. She didn't even do the decency of, saying, okay, look this way or that way, or, perhaps it was a bit wrong. She sort of did a slight disclaimer saying that, what was it? While I can never be proud of the promise of bullets, well done for completing a piece. And I thought this was absolutely disgraceful. And it's incredibly worrying because it means that the whole system of academia is actually quite compromised, because all of these university structures, all of these academia structures work on what is essentially peer review. And you find that when you do an assignment, all Harvard method, maybe 3 paragraphs of a page document are your original sentences, and the rest are all, citations from this document, from this journal, from this author, from this. It's all peer-related peer review. And what happens is you find a perpetuation of the same ideas, the same principles, the same bases, the same biases. And this is incredibly frightening, because it means that this narrative is already so deeply ingrained into academia, which is supposed to be the place where free thinking reigns, where critical thinking can reign. And it's just really frightening that this is what's happened in the commonplace. It's really, really frightening. Actually, having come out of doing my own study quite recently, it's particularly hits quite home for me. And I thought this was quite shocking. And then it poses, we're then faced with another question. What, like you say in your title, what now? Yeah, exactly. What now? What can we do? What can we as a people, what can we do to sort of hold this whole show? What can we do to hold this whole show, sort of like up against the mirror and be like, look, guys, it's time to be accountable for this. I mean, how do we hold UCT accountable for this? How do we hold this vice chancellor accountable? I mean, never mind the guy who wrote it. This guy, if I'm going to speak my mind, I'll probably have to leave your channel. How do we hold these people accountable for this? I mean, this is insanity. What can we do to actually sort of bring this back to reality and hold this a bit? What can we actually do?
That's a massive problem that we're seeing here in South Africa, with the fact that in our constitution it says we have free speech, but we don't have free speech, because it says in the constitution you are free to speak or you express yourself in any way except when it is hate speech. But the problem that we are sitting with here is, how do we define hate? If it was open for anyone to say whatever they wanted to, it would have been better, I think, because the people in power define what is hate and what is not. And according to the people in power who make our laws, who write our laws, what's going on is not hate speech. What's calling for violence against white people is not hate speech. Calling for the slaughter and for the shooting of white people is not hate speech. These things are okay. And also what we saw with Vicky Momberg, for example, the woman who went to jail for 3 years for using a racial slur against black people. How do you even compare that? And you can't even compare a racial slur to an absolute call for violence, a call to kill people. But yet the call for violence, the call to kill a minority in a country is being praised by the authorities, is being praised, and it's being perpetuated by the authorities. And that's how we go on while the racial slur from the other side is being jailed. People using a racial slur is being jailed. And it's all about power. It's about the black government trying to show us all and trying to prove to us all how powerful they are. It's like the best thing that I can even compare this with is a prison rape system. You know, where people don't rape other people because, you know, they feel sexually attracted to them. They rape people in prison, and these things have been proven. They rape people in prison to show them that they are powerful and they are more powerful than them, and they are higher up in the power hierarchy. And that's exactly what we are seeing here in South Africa, where one person is free to go out and call for the violence against another, and one person can perpetuate violence against another group, and then if the other group just so much as insult the powerful group, they get sent to jail. And that's exactly the same concept. That's what we're seeing in South Africa, and it can't go on. It has to stop, or everything's going to, you know, explode.
Well, look, I definitely that we are too. Look, as white people and as black people, I think that we are too fundamentally different. We have two very separate, very proud identities, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that the cruelty is that we've been put in such a situation where we're made to fight over this fact instead of being able to just celebrate ourselves and celebrate each other and move forward as unique individuals, you know, trying to work towards a common goal.
Forced integration. That's what we saw since 1990s, is forced integration or state-authorized integration.
It's a complete fallacy. I don't agree with it on any level, and in fact this word equality I'd like to throw right out the window, because actually, what is equality? How can you quantify equality, and how do you implement equality? For example, yourself and myself, if someone is to derive a model of equality and say, right, let's impose it on these two people, how is it going to fit? Because even between yourself and myself, who both are South African, both probably have a very similar background, both have very similar, you know, ideals and perspectives, we are still very unique individuals. So what are you going to put down and say this is equality? I think equality is the worst marketed idea under the sun, and I think it should be thrown away.
Well, if you want to look at equality, you have to look where it comes from, and it comes from the Enlightenment era, through the same channels as communism came from. It's just this whole idea that we need to be equal. It's completely alien to any society in the history of the earth, except for the last few years when cultural Marxism has dominated the narrative. If you look at Europe pre-World War II, the whole notion of equality wasn't even, it's not even something that was discussed. It was discussed, but it wasn't something that was mainstream. If you look at Asia, it was never an idea that was ever perpetuated, and still today there's no such thing as equality in Japan or South Korea or whatever. And also with the native African populations, there was never equality. There was always a very, very strong hierarchy. There was always a very strong leader who was considered the king of the tribe, or the chief, or whatever, depending on which tribe we were talking about. And he ruled over that tribe with an iron fist, and whatever he said was the
law. Exactly.
Was law. And that's just how the earth has been until we've seen this enlightenment for equality. But equality is very, very much backfiring on us all over the West, and I think the age of liberalism is slowly, or not slowly, but it's quickly coming to an end now. Because it can't work anymore. The Roman Republic stood for 500 years, and the Roman Empire, depending on which ones you're talking about, another 1,500 years after that. But this whole liberal system of the West won't last more than 100 years or more, or a lot more than 100 years, I would say. I think we are on the deathbed of this idea.
I would agree with you there, because I think liberalism actually, I think it actually portrays a lot more of the people's common values than a conservative outlook would take. And in fact, I think that it's this word equality has been put into the mouths of these African individuals of South Africa, and they've just run with it without knowing what it really means, and how it actually isn't what they're even looking for. Because if you can get one to speak rationally, they'll say, you know what, we also want to be able to be in a position where we're not paying, for example, what they call the black tax, where if they're the first people, they're the first of their family to get into university, and it's extra difficult for them because someone wasn't there to pave the way before. Now, this I find is not the excuse for their behavior, because I'm also the first person of my direct bloodline to make it through university in my family. I did very well. There was no one before me, and we weren't particularly wealthy. We've only in recent years we've managed to crawl ourselves out of the hut, and we're quite proud of that fact. But what I would say is, look, me personally, I would like to scrap the government system we have in South Africa completely. It's really it's a terrible thing, and I don't, having studied something that was strongly leaning in economics, it's my personal opinion that there is no one economic model that suits a country. People would say that, the free market model is the right one. It's not. It is the base. It would be the base, but it's going to need to borrow from its cousins. It's going to need to borrow some ideals from communism and some practices from socialism. And government intervention needs to be the most limited feature of such a system, where what they are only and exclusively is a small facilitator of infrastructure and of services, and service being the medical facilitation, not the provision. They're not going to oversee it. Then it's just facilitate the establishments, the buildings, and the equipment, and then so the infrastructure of the roads and service delivery, so your sanitations, and then also for the facilitation of the education establishments, not the execution, not putting the teachers in, not providing the syllabus, none of that, just making sure that the buildings and that the standing and the funding is in order. And that's supposed to be where they stop.
I just want to get back to that part of where you say it's always being blamed on the previous generation, and these people say, they're the first in their family to make it to university, and that's why it's incredibly difficult to them. I think that's complete and utter nonsense, and we see this exact same idea being perpetuated by all the groups, if you believe in the whole leftist idea of intersectionality, because feminists would, for example, say it's the patriarchy holding them down, or blacks in South Africa would say it's the institution of or the institutionalized racism and the legacy of apartheid holding them back, or blacks in America would say it's the legacy of slavery, and then you can go through every single one of these groups that compete in the victim Olympics, and it's just all nonsense. It's incredibly I've seen many people throughout my life who were able to pull themselves up by the bootstraps, who work themselves out of this poverty. If you live in a free society with a free market, it's not that difficult to be successful. If you can just come up with a product and you can sell it in simple terms, you can become successful financially. And this whole idea that it's always someone else's fault, it's just a way for people, to blame everything on everyone but themselves, and to feel better about themselves because they are, in all actuality, losers at life, and they haven't achieved anything in their lifetimes, and now they have to blame it on someone else. They will never blame themselves, so they blame all these fictional made-up structures or systems.
For sure. In South Africa, we suffer terribly, and there's something that I like to refer to as the white grace. And these ailments of being, all these previous and external and whatever parties that get the blame, I think it's a total result of the white grace. And the reason why I say that is because what happens when these people say, yes, but, it's the fault of, and it's not my fault, it's the fault of those who came before me. The white grace says, yes, you know what, it's fine, it's right, here you go. So of course they're going to continue with it.
No, I'm 100% with you on that. Thank you very much for coming up, Gray. I think I'll take my last caller now.
Sure, man.
So
Have a
I'll,
great evening.
I'll
Chatting
put
to you.
I'll put you back there in the waiting channel, and you can tell them to bring up the next guy. Otherwise, I see.
Sure.
We'll end this off here. I don't want to go over an hour again because I want the videos to be watchable for people watching later. Cheers, Gray.
Cheers, man.
Well, that was very interesting. I see Conscious Caracal say, yeah, I should get Clip Cop on again. Like last time, it was very interesting, yeah. If I don't get someone else up now, I think we'll end this off now, yeah. I see there are almost 500 people watching, so, and just 200 likes, so you guys can chuck a like in there. Hello, Mick, how are you?
Good on you, but doing well, man.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself? You'll be our last caller.
Yes. You know, again, white South African male. You know, there's so many things that we need to deal with essentially in the country. You know, just listening to this cast tonight, there's a few pointers that I drew up myself. And just shoot through a few of them. And my views are a bit, you know, they are a bit anarchist. But taking the current situation in our country, how can they not be? For the current government to carry on, generally, I believe that my peers should have a certain level of an anarchist approach, if one will. So there's no real understanding of accountability. It's always easier to blame the minority, and this is as simple as this entire thing gets. If I take the tax that the ANC has received, our government has received, I mean, we just did a stupid calculation out of one household, and the amount of low-cost houses we could build ourselves per year if we did not have to pay tax. I mean, it's remarkable what we would actually be able to achieve.
Well, why? That's the question. Why do we even need to build low-cost houses for people who don't want to work themselves, who don't want to work and make enough money to build their own houses? That's the whole joke for me. Why are we even doing that?
But then it falls back to the understanding of accountability. It's always easier to blame the minority. It's a simpler approach. I would love to see these UCT approaches, this anti-white propaganda, reversed roles. I would love to see that happen. And if someone actually does have the guts to do it one day, and they would probably end up in jail. But imagine I did wear a shirt that said anti-black. I can guarantee you.
Just anti-black.
Yes, I would be shot by the end of the day. I don't doubt it for a second. Where I live, I'm dead within a day. There's no two ways about it. But these are the types of slogans and slurs that are pushed in our faces every single day. And it's so easy to push it onto a minority. You know, I was recently told by one of our clients that they're not able to use us anymore. We're white.
Well, that's terrible. Well, it's the law. It's BEE. It's the law. You have to use black-owned firms.
Yeah, I would love to have it in writing. You know, yes, Mr. Client, please put that down on a piece of paper for me, and then we'll take it forward from there. But now, as you said, one racial slur or one racial incident, and you know, one of our peers ends up in jail for 3 years, and she's paying for it now. You know, there's just zero equality at all. It's you know, I do believe one way or another there's a breaking point from either side.
I think,
not necessarily from the smaller groups within South Africa, and I'm talking Indians and so forth and so on. It's it's definitely coming from one of the larger groups. There is a breaking point to everything. There's always a reaction to an action. And these actions will attract a reaction eventually. And this is where we sit, is survive in that reaction of what is currently happening in South Africa.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I want to end this off here. Is there anything else you would like to say as a closing statement before I end off?
Definitely. The basic rules still apply. So no matter what UCT or any public figure tries to swing, this country was built in front of an international community on an international stage. And this leaves a certain level of accountability from the international community, full stop. Whether that reaction is delayed or not. Obviously, as a minority, we would prefer if it wasn't delayed, but there will always be a reaction because it was in or on an international stage. The world has looked at us before because of apartheid and everything else. I mean, we have been looked at and scrutinized quite intensely. Nothing has changed. They're still looking, and this is one of the big neglects that a lot of people fail, especially UCT. They don't look at the bigger picture because they see the students, they see local community, and it's very micro. But they don't realize there's a macro reaction throughout the entire world, whether they like it or not, because South Africa is on an international platform.
Yeah, and as I spoke to this other guy from Russia, it was very interesting to see how much just Russia, for example, in the Russian news sources are reporting on all of this. I think in the non-English speaking world, there's a lot of accountability going on for what's being said and what's being done.
Yes, definitely. Well, in closing, it is my view that we will build, as in the minority will eventually build an independent state within the borders. And as you said, the current situation as it goes isn't going to last. Yes, 100 years, it survives, great. But it will eventually break down into smaller groups. Those smaller groups will protect themselves and so forth and so on. And make no mistake, they will be protected by the West because there's interest from the West side. Western nations will protect the interest of those smaller groups. But as I said, how long will it take before the international community actually reacts? And I think that is something we need to already start preparing for, is how long before there's a reaction from the community? Is it a year? Is it 2 years? Do we have what we need?
I'm 100% with you, and I think that's something that we can think about a lot. Thank you very much for coming up, Mick. I've just gone over an hour. I wanted to keep it under an hour. But I'm going to make the closing statements now. So cheers to you.
That's perfect. Thanks, Samal. Have a great evening.
Bye. Yeah, so basically in closing statements, I think this was an extremely informative stream. Especially I was very interested by the guy calling in from Russia. That was very, very interesting to hear from him. And thank you guys for watching. If you haven't watched the whole thing, I would really strongly suggest going back and watching that part where, especially where the Russian guy called in, and also some of the other conversations that we had. It was excellent. And please remember to leave a like before you're off. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you for watching, and God bless you guys. Cheers.